Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam, and welcome to Let It Rip. We're coming to you from the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. Here on Let It Rip, we've often focused on policing in our communities. The subject is once again at the forefront and in the headlines following the death of Tyre Nichols at the hands of Memphis police officers. The images are difficult to look at. Nichols, mercilessly beaten by 5 Memphis cops after an altercation that began with Nichols being pulled over for alleged reckless driving. So far, the 5 officers you see on the video have been fired, arrested, and charged with second-degree murder. One other officer has also been fired. Some have pointed to the fact that the 5 officers initially involved in the case are all black, while questioning if it is even in the same league as George Floyd's death under the knee of Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin, while others say it is definitely police brutality regardless of the race of the officers involved, and that more needs to be done to correct policing in this country. They say it's a question of blue, not black and white. So let's tackle the issue. Here to help us out, we have 3 guests. Retired NYPD officer Priscilla Hardin, John Jay College professor and Training Academy sergeant and police firearms instructor Felipe Rodriguez, and co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, Hawk Newsome. This is Let It Rip. Welcome to all of you. Priscilla, when you first saw that video, what was your reaction?
Disgusted, angered, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't watch the whole thing. It bothered me.
What do you think we're dealing with there? 5 cops are black, but not white. So is that a situation where that is a blue problem we're dealing with? What are we seeing there?
I looked at it like a mental problem. You know, I did 20 years in Brooklyn North, in Brooklyn, and I've never even maced anybody. My training from NYPD in the 90s, the thing that stuck out with me to take with me with my career was called verbal judo. It's talking, how you approach an individual, how you speak to an individual. You know.
There's no talking in that case.
No talking. I didn't even really understand the video. Where was the humanity in that?
What did you see there? What did you think?
What I see is police doing what they were intended to do since the beginning, the inception of policing. And what we're talking about is the fugitive slave patrols. We're talking about the earliest interactions of black people and police officers. They've always been biased. They've always been hostile. These are problems that have continued, and America has yet to fix them. They talk about we should train more, right? You look at Tyre Nichols and you're disgusted, right? You want to grab something, you want to hurt something. You are past feelings of peace and harmony. You're past that. So what you see in an instance is everything that they call for us to do with policing fail. They said we need more black officers. There are 5 black officers. It's interesting to note that the white officers who tased him were not charged. You had 5 black officers. You had the use of body cam. They still beat him. You had more officers responding at the same time to eliminate these problems. Police reform in all of its efforts that have been taking place since Rodney King, since MLK, all failed. The only solution, I'm sorry, is to abolish.
No, that's fine. I want to get Felipe in on this too, though. He works with the training. Are you buying what Hawk is saying here?
At one point we have to see it, but training takes time. You know, it's not like a magical pill that we give someone and they feel better the next day. The problem was that these officers, and I immediately go into the analytical phase when I saw this happen, and I was disgusted. This was not policing. This was equivalent to a gang assault. That's the reality of it. The practice with training is...
So it was criminal.
It was criminal. I'm not taking, well, the truth is the truth, and I'm for that. All right? At the end of the day, what happened was they threw out their training out the window. They took it personal. These officers, some of them, should not have been in a Scorpion unit. It was a highly proactive unit with officers that had very little time. When we do that, we have a recipe for disaster. We've seen it here in New York with our street crime unit. Look at the horrible shooting that we had, right? The individual was being chased after because they thought he had a gun. He turned around with his wallet, and multiple shots were fired. Some of those officers shouldn't have even been in that unit either. And I agree. You know what? It has to be fixed.
I just want to correct you. He wasn't being chased. He was standing at his mailbox. You're talking about Amadou Diallo?
Correct.
And he turned around with
He turned around with his wallet, yes.
Yeah.
But they were thinking he was a serial rapist because I'm very historical, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
With all
get
due
it. No,
respect.
and I'm glad that we're talking about history, right?
It's important.
Let's talk about Jamal Whitehead, corrections officers, gang assault. Let's talk about Mayor Adams bringing back the same street crime unit. There were some tweaks because of political pressure by us, but it's still the same thing. I can show you video because you seem like you want to know what's going on, where this same type of aggression is happening in the Bronx right now. These aren't isolated instances, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, right? I deal with things at a very natural and basic level, and at that level, police do not respect us in our communities.
They have to.
But they don't, sir.
Then we have to hold them accountable.
It seems like we've been trying that since Dr. King. The only solution is abolishing the police and creating a new body to make people obey the law. Let's take people who have social work degrees, who are solutions oriented, and arm them and send them in to solve these
I
problems.
want to ask Priscilla a quick question, though. Are black cops under more pressure to rein in African Americans and people of color?
You're going to have pressure because there are those I feel officers have a point to make. I want to maybe go into a different unit or climb the ladder and rank and things of that nature. They may have something to prove.
Hawk, what were you thinking about that? I saw you kind of turn away.
Okay, the problem is regular, rational people who are police officers can't apply ration to police. They cannot apply logic. And she's being extremely honest in what she perceives. But the facts are contradictory to what she's asserting.
What do you mean?
Black police and police in general target and harass everybody in specific communities. There aren't specific individuals, they're specific communities. Me, as a college student basketball player, walking down the street was frisked. Me and my friends, high school students, just walking around, stopped, frisked. There was no respect. There was no courtesy in us, in the way they handled us. And lastly, black police go out of their way to convince their superiors that they are not like these everyday Negroes that they encounter into the street. And I've called them brother before, and they were like, nah, I'm not black, I'm blue. That happened most recently at the Dominican parade right outside of your studio.
Felipe, what do you think about that?
At the end of the day, he brought out a valid point. We're not teaching our cops our history, and especially with the African American community. Now we see that finally the Division of Criminal Justice, DCJS, that is in charge of training, has finally started bringing about the idea of principal policing, all right, and implicit bias. So we are addressing some of the issues, but remember, the instructors, due to COVID and everything else, are just actually taking this training. I took it maybe a year ago. So it's going to take a while to roll out, and we do need to learn the history of the African American people and the policing, because I specifically saw that I was lacking as a trainer. So I actually went to John Jay, and they have an advanced criminal justice degree in race and the criminal justice. And when you focus and you learn, we do see that we are doing things wrong, and we do need to fix it.
I want to talk about the training thing, though. You know, whenever something goes sideways with policing, it seems to me that two things come up. Hey, we need more training. You know, that's always one of the things. And the officer feared for his safety. How do we get beyond that? Because that seems to be where we go with every single one of these incidents.
I'll give you the perfect incident that you brought about, right? The stop, question, and or possibly frisk. That's the way it was taught. The cops ended up doing what? Stop and frisking. So we ended up missing a crucial part of that training. And while it was being used as a tool, because remember, in New York City at that time, we had almost 2,900 homicides, 2,400 homicides. It was really high. So the officers were reacting to that high homicide rate, and therefore they were not following the actual training of stop, question, and or possibly frisk. They did violate the law, and we need to admit it.
That's actually interesting. If you think back, I do have a law degree, and I believe the case was Matt v. Ohio, right? And the standard was reasonably articulable suspicion. So they just had to articulate why they were stopping you. And that reason was you were black in a poor neighborhood. The problem is, the truth is, we don't need police anymore. We need people who come in with the problem-solving mentality to make people obey the law. Our jails punish people. Jails in other countries, they are therapeutic. They address the issues that led people down those roads. And when you say abolish the police, people are like, oh my God. We're not talking about letting criminals run free. We're talking about getting better people to do these things. Lastly, we have to use our imaginations, because slavery was okay. Jim Crow was okay. Segregation was okay. All of these things were okay until we found a better way to do things.
But you know what?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. When you say we need to, the reform, and we need to bring in, the social workers, people of that stature. I was a social worker. I had an incredible effect on the people in my community, which was, I had a great career. Worked in Fort Greene, in the bricks is what I call it, even sometimes alone. Everyone knew Officer Harden, AKA Hard Rock. I had no problem with anybody, and it was all in how I treated individuals. I was that social worker. I was that one. It even came to a point where, you sit in the office and you talk to the young black man, a juvenile, and to let him know on the side, listen, we represent each other. I could get a shout out in the middle of Fort Greene. Like, are there many of us? I don't know, but I know that I did my job 1,000. I don't even have a CCRB, not even a complaint.
I think she's proven my point. I said all of them need that qualification, and she said she's
And that's
never
true.
maced anyone.
Never.
That's my case and my point in its entirety.
With the training, I don't know about training, but I know about the psyche, the mental. I think like 5 years on the job.
Are they hiring the wrong people, though?
Probably. Because, 5 years on the job. Get a mental evaluation. 10 years on the job. How you doing? Are you able to handle are you able to handle the street? Because you got to be special to be able to deal with the community and in the neighborhoods in which you work.
Yeah, I think when I listen to some of this conversation, one of the problems is messaging. The moment you say abolish the police, shuts everything down.
Absolutely.
It does. It is a harsh word to throw out there.
Yeah.
But I think that everybody's kind of looking to go the same direction here. Let's fix this problem here so that we are not victims out in our own community.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's going to have to be the last word on that. It's an issue that we're going to stay on top of here at Let It Rip. I want to thank our guests, retired NYPD officer Priscilla Harden, John Jay College professor and Training Academy sergeant and firearms instructor Felipe Rodriguez, and co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, Hawk Newsom. Thank you to all of you. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more on Let It Rip. Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. So, how do we solve the problems of police brutality and misconduct? Many are looking for greater accountability when officers overstep and victimize New Yorkers. The names of the victims are etched in the history of the city, from Amadou Diallo and Abner Louima to Sean Bell and Akai Gurley, just to name a few. Sure, we have the Civilian Complaint Review Board, but is it enough, or does there need to be an entity with more power and transparency? Here to discuss the situation and legislation designed to help solve the problem called the Community Power Act, we have three guests: journalist and City College professor Herb Boyd, the lead sponsor of the bill, Councilmember Charles Barron, and Felipe Rodriguez is still with us. Charles, let's start with you. What would this legislation do?
This would make it in the hands of the people, an elected review board. They're going to combine the 51 council districts into 17, and each district will have one vote on the board. But the main thing is that the present Civilian Complaint Review Board, 5 appointees for the mayor, 5 appointees from the city council, 3 from the commissioner of police, and one from the public advocate. And when they finish, it goes to the police commissioner to determine the consequences.
So how will this be different?
This will be totally different. There will be no appointments from the mayor, the city council, or the public advocate. They'll be elected by the community. That's number one. Number two, the police commissioner will be out of it completely, that the consequences and the results from their investigations, disciplinary measures, will come from the board itself.
Okay, Felipe, I see you chomping at the bit over there.
Oh.
What do you think about that idea?
We need balance. I think it is a good idea to have, the community empowered to have some sort of judgment on their officers. But if they've never walked a beat, if they've never been police officers, they miss that essential, eye to see what an officer is actually doing wrong. And while I do understand Letitia James, and I don't get political, but all I'm saying is we already have those systems in place. People don't understand right now that if a police officer is even driving and he rear-ends somebody and that person dies, even though he's completely out of service and off duty, the New York State Attorney General's office is going to jump in and investigate. So why should we duplicate efforts? Anything that a police officer or a New York State peace officer does will become now under the spectrum where a death takes place under the Attorney General.
Charles, you're shaking your head.
Because that doesn't happen. When did she ever investigate and prosecute anybody? Never at all. So what you saying that's not happening. So when that's not happening, you don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, and police are not being prosecuted. So it's not happening, and we don't have to know how the police walk on their beat and experience. We know when you come up to us and call us out of our name, when you shoot at Amadou Diallo 41 times and Sean Bell 50 times, stick up Abdul Lawima's rectum, we don't need to be police officers to understand that they need to go to jail for that and not retrained, but they need to go to jail. And they're more likely to be punished with an elected civilian review board. That has nothing to do with knowing what a police life is on their beat.
Mm-hmm. Herb, I want to go to you real quick and kind of get your feeling on this, because you and I have covered a lot of these stories where unarmed black men have died at the hands of police. Do you think that the type of system that Charles is proposing here would have a positive effect? Do you think it would work?
Well, let's see how we can get it through, huh, Charles? The proposal sounds good. There's an article in the current issue of the Independent by John Tufo, and he does a fantastic job of breaking it down. It's a nice analysis, a critique of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, showing its toothlessness, its weakness, and what needs to be done to remedy that situation. Some of the things that Charles has proposed, particularly removing it out of the commissioner's authority, to have like a final word on that thing, moving toward having some prosecutorial power, which it does not possess, having it brought to galvanized in such a way as that, we have more of a community involvement in this situation. So there's a number of issues involved, and I think what Charles has proposed, I don't know how you get that done, Charles, through the council and everything.
I'll let you know. Well, the way we get it done is that it's a charter revision. So the mayor could do it, the council could do it, or we can do it by petition through the community process. But the petition process usually doesn't work because the mayor bumps them off. So all we have to do is get the council to support this. I have 10 members that already support it. We're telling the speaker we need a hearing. She doesn't even want to give us a hearing on it, much less a vote.
So is it dead in the water?
No, it's not dead in the water because I have a discharge opportunity. I can discharge it out of any committee that's not given a bill a hearing. You can get 7 council members to discharge it, and then it automatically goes before the full council. But we have to get something. This would be the strongest piece of legislation in the nation. Remember all of those things that they gave us? Body cameras. Well, they showed us what they was doing to our brother in Memphis, Nicholas. They beat him to death with their body cameras on. We had a no choke hold bill. Shortly after that, they choked somebody regardless because none of the prosecution is in the hands of an independent body. This would give it that.
Would that be better for residents, though, Felipe, for them to be able to get involved in that, to have more transparency?
I'm all for police accountability, and I'm all for holding officers accountable for everything that they do. But I just want a balance. I don't want this constant oversteer that we're having where we decide to just fix things at 100 miles an hour and it makes it worse. At this point, we are hemorrhaging police officers left and right. No one wants to do this job, and it's an honorable job. But at this point, I just don't even know what we're going to do.
What about qualified immunity? At the federal level, they talk about that a lot. Do you think that's something that might need to change, or are you against that?
At some point, you do have to have the officers, but the removal of qualified immunity has now made these officers so afraid to do their job. And I've always said, good decisions are great. Bad decisions
I have
still
a problem.
a decision.
I have a problem with that.
But
though.
indecision
You're
gets you
paid
killed.
to do that job.
Look, if you're afraid
We're not perfect.
Yeah.
You
If
know,
you're-
we're not perfect.
right.
I know that.
But if you're afraid to do your job, get another job.
I agree,
Because
and
the
but
bottom
it's happening.
line, if you're getting paid, and we're arming these police officers with 9mm Glocks, with tasers, and we're arming them with weapons to whip us. So if they got all of that, and you're afraid because you don't want to be held accountable for bad behavior, that's ridiculous.
I'm not saying bad behavior.
No,
I'm saying the use of force.
I
Use
know,
of
but
force never looks good, and I agree with that.
it's
Because
abuse abuse.
It's not always abuse because sometimes the resistance is there. I'm pro people, believe me. I'm for this city and I'm passionate about this city. But at the end of the day, guess what? Force sometimes has to be used, and it's not pretty, and that's what we need to
And we're not
realize.
talking about legitimate force. We're talking about the abuse of deadly force. No force needed to be used against Amadou Diallo, not at all. None of the people that we have on a list of countless victims did they need to use force because they weren't committing any crimes. They had no dangerous weapons. So you're telling me that police officer shouldn't be brought to justice by an independent
I'll
agency?
put him in handcuffs
Let's
myself.
get Herb in here too now. Herb, let me get your reaction to this conversation. What do you think?
Well, qualified immunity for our audience is a shield provided to protect the police officers. We say, let's do away with that.
Right.
These officers, it took years even to fire. Look at the Eric Gardner situation. I mean, look at Sean Bell. How long it took to fire those officers? That's just ridiculous. It's a miscarriage of justice right there.
It kind of feels like it does put a little more skin in the game in the sense that it makes a person more accountable, I think.
Yes, it does.
But I guess that could go the other way.
And also, we need to be able to sue the individual cop, not just the department, because our taxpaying dollars are paying when they get sued.
It is.
If they was held accountable for it, they can get sued and get rid of the qualified immunity.
Should you be able to sue a cop?
If it's something egregious, I believe so. But at the point that we just sue to sue, you know, in certain counties, you see some tremendous payouts here compared to others, just because of the anti-police sentiment, and we just can't have that. The cops are basically, at this point, no one wants the job. What are we going to do at this point?
When you say sue to sue, though, what do you mean?
You know, you see other counties, and especially the county that I've lived in, the Bronx, you know, they sue constantly, and you see sometimes they're frivolous. But the New York City Council, in its infinite wisdom, decides not to fight, and they just settle. We just can't have that, the constant settling that they're doing. I looked at the statistics, and the money we're paying out should be going to social programs. It shouldn't be going out to an individual.
Well,
for
you
a
know what?
situation.
To have that as a budget item.
Look, we'll tell them to stop beating us down and they won't get sued.
What about residency?
I think they should live in the districts that they are policing. If they came home to a neighborhood that they are policing, they would think twice before disrespecting people, beating them down because they have to come home and live next to those very same people.
We can't afford it. That's the simple thing.
Yes, you
know
can.
what?
To pay for the housing.
It's not. Cops haven't gotten, let's be honest. And I'm not trying to be pro-cop. I'm just trying to be pro-honest.
Well, you're doing a good job.
No,
being
sir.
pro-cop.
Herb, you wanted to add something there?
No, I was just saying that, Charles, what about putting those cops back on the beat instead of riding around in patrol cars?
Right. I
Back
think
in
they
the
should-
old days when I grew up
That's
in
right.
Detroit, we had them walking the beat. The cops knew if there was like an individual in the neighborhood that sometimes would go berserk, you didn't have to shoot him down. we recognized the problem and we could approach and deal with it.
put 'em
Cops
back-
on the beat were
Right.
very effective.
Put
I'm
them
sorry,
back on
go
the
ahead.
beat,
Okay.
but once they beat us, they got to go.
Okay, that's going to have to be the last word. Okay, good discussion on topics that need to be addressed. I want to thank our guests, journalist and City College professor Herb Boyd, John Jays, Felipe Rodriguez, and the lead sponsor of the Community Power Act, Councilmember Charles Barron. Thank you all for joining us here. We're going to take a short break, and I'll be back with a little bit of history. You're watching Let It Rip. Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. The Super Bowl is in the books, and this one made history, not just for the final score, but for something special within the game. For the first time, two black quarterbacks led their teams in what's arguably the biggest sporting event in the U.S. Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts went up against the Chiefs' Patrick Mahomes. It was a long time coming and did not disappoint, with the two teams playing to a 35-35 tie until the Chiefs and Mahomes won on a last-second field goal. It took forever to get a black quarterback in the big game, when Doug Williams won the MVP award back in 1988, with Washington tossing 4 touchdown passes in a single quarter. He would later go on to coach Grambling University's football team. Kudos to Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes for making Super Bowl history. I'm Mike Gilliam. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let It Rip.